Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. This is Tour of Slovenia 2022. Now, at this race, 5 stages long, UAE Team Emirates, Tadej Pogačar dominated throughout the 5 days. His teammate Rafał Majka was spectacular. Bahrain Victorious were horrendous on their tactics throughout this 5-day stage race, and I'll break down some of that. I need to cover this race even though it's finished because, of course, covering Dauphiné, where Primož Roglič and Jumbo-Visma dominated that race. Then we went in the Tour of Swiss. Team Ineos, Geraint Thomas win the general classification on the last individual time trial stage. Now we're getting ready for the Tour de France, right? So you can't leave out Tadej Pogačar. We have to talk about how dominating he was, and I want to talk about Bahrain Victorious, how spectacularly bad they were on all 3 of these races before the Tour de France starts. Because remember, Bahrain Victorious is a solid team. When you're talking UAE Team Emirates, Ineos, and of course Jumbo-Visma, those are dominating teams trying to go for overall victories. But Bahrain Victorious is always right behind them and has to be considered one of the big favorite teams. So their tactics in the races throughout Dauphiné, Swiss, and of course here at Slovenia were absolutely horrendous. Now let's get into Slovenia, and I'm going to cover them a little fast. Keep in mind, this race is already finished, so I'm not going to be spot on with all the kilometers, but I will be spot on with the tactics because that's what I do on the Butterfly Effect and Beyond the Coverage. Now, we're at stage 1. It's a fantastic stage, about 165 kilometers long, and the tacks are going to start on the big mountain climb with 60 kilometers to go at the finish of this stage 1. It's going to be Bahrain Victorious starting all the accelerations at the bottom of the climb after UAE Team Emirates had rode through most of the stage. Now, this is a massive mistake right here from Bahrain Victorious, and the first major one they'll make here on stage 1. When you go into a steep climb here at Slovenia, and I did this race way back in 2014 with Team Lampre before the Tour de France, so I'm familiar a little bit with these roads. It's a spectacular country, but the climbs are steep, hard, narrow, and always technical. So with Bahrain Victorious starting the attacks here at the bottom of the climb, makes no sense at all. Remember, Tadej Pogačar, #1 rider in the world. He hasn't raced his bike for a long time. I believe you got to go all the way back to the classic spring season since the last time he raced. So Bahrain Victorious possibly are thinking, let's see if we can catch the Slovenian Tour de France champion, 2-time Tour de France champion, off guard. They're riding the front hard and blowing the field up, and then Tadej Pogačar decides to light everybody up and starts going up the road with his teammate Rafał Majka latched on. And then they have the Bahrain Victorious, Damian Novak, latched on too when they go over the top of the climb. Damian Novak at this point in time has been good with his tactics in terms of just sitting on. Probably because it was the only option he had with Tadej Pogačar up there absolutely drilling it and putting the suffer to everybody else in the peloton here at Tour of Slovenia. Now, when they start going down the backside of the climb, this is when Damian Novak makes a massive mistake here. He starts getting bullied from Rafał Majka, UAE Team Emirates, teammate of Tadej Pogačar. Once the bullying starts, all of a sudden, Novak starts coming through and taking a pull. Big no-no at this point in time, and as big of a knucklehead as you can possibly point out, because behind, chasing, back there is going to be Matej Mohoric with Sean Bennett. Now, Matej Mohoric is bombing down the descent, trying to close the gap up to the 3 leaders in front, and one's his teammate that's taking pulls on the front. Go back in the group back there chasing, let's call it 15-20 riders strong back there, and you got Jan Tratnik from Bahrain Victorious sitting on back there. So, Bahrain Victorious at the front, taking pulls with Tadej Pogačar, the 2-time Tour de France champion. Matej Mohoric in the second group chasing for dear life, getting some help from Sean Bennett, the American rider riding for the China team. And then you go further back into the peloton. Jan Tratnik is sitting back there getting a free ride. So up front, Damian Novak, what are you doing taking pulls? Now, the GCN commentators are talking about how he has to take a pull right here or he could start getting attacked. No, you don't. You sit on at this point in time. The race has just started. It has just started getting fast and aggressive, and it was caused that way because of Bahrain Victorious being knuckleheads trying to drop Tadej Pogačar up a climb in his own house and neighborhood here in Tour of Slovenia, which is a big no-no. If you remember right, like I said, he won last year's edition of Tour of Slovenia. Now, once Damian Novak starts taking small pulls up front, they're not spectacular, they're not huge pulls, but remember, his teammates chasing, and we know his teammates close because there's no cars in between the groups here all chasing the 3 up front. Now, we get in the valley before the final and last climb. Dominik Novak, he starts talking along with Tadej Pogačar, and some kind of deal is reached here. I don't know exactly what it is. I don't know if he's just saying, hey, I'm going to sit on here, or hey, I'll be happy to get second. Don't drop me up this last climb. But I think it's the latter of the two, because they go up the final climb that'll crest with about 10, 15 kilometers before the finish of today's stage. And neither Tadej Pogačar or Rafał Majka tried to attack Dominik Novak, who's still sitting on more or less going up this climb. Over the top, we will see Dominik Novak basically sitting on this group up front. And then in the final, with about under 3 kilometers to go, we're going to see Tadej Pogačar throw in his attack. And then Tadej Pogačar is going to get brought back right away from Dominik Novak. Tadej Pogačar is going to ride on the front for a little bit until just about 1.5 kilometers to go, when it's going to be his teammate Rafał Majka that throws in attack. He throws an attack going up the right side of the road. Dominik Novak is looking back. At this point in time, there's no reason to really be looking back for Tadej Pogačar unless you guys have made a deal. And right after that, all the way to the line, they're running about 4-second gap between the rider up front, Rafał Majka, UAE Team Emirates, and the two behind, Dominik Novak. To me, at my eyes sitting on the couch, I think there had to be some kind of deal here where Dominik Novak was happy to get second place. But remember, there was options to play back there. Rafał Majka will come through and take the stage win, and Tadej Pogačar will sit on the wheel to get third, even though they had a little bump to the finish. Now, Dominik Novak, Bahrain victorious. What were you guys thinking? There are radios in the race here. I've seen it many times with the riders using them throughout the race, and I especially saw them when Dominik Novak is doing a little bit of chatting back there with Tadej Pogačar and Rafał Majka, when all three riders end up getting on the radio and talking back to their teams about the same time. So whenever riders are having a conversation and then immediately they're on the radio, something's being relayed about that conversation up front and to the directors behind. But remember, when the GCN commentators here are talking about how he had no choice but to come through, I'll give you a bunch of different choices. Bahrain victorious on today's stage. Dominik Novak should have sat on for sure. Matej Mohoric got within 25 seconds of closing that gap. If he had a little help, they might have closed it. If Dominik Novak sits on that group and they slow down just a bit, remember there's a big group of 15, 20 riders back there being led by Iolo Kometa and Kern Pharma, along with a couple help from Stana riders back there. So if those groups can come back together, Bahrain victorious, you'd have your three strongest riders on stage one here before any general classification is decided to play tactical games against Rafał Majka and Tadej Pogačar. And Rafał Majka being the second strongest guy in this group for sure, but he had blown a lot of bullets trying to stay with Tadej Pogačar on this stage one going up that climb. So I got to believe his legs would have been a little bit tired, and that 3-against-2 odds might have been somewhat doable against the UAE Team Emirates. Now, I know, sitting up here on the podium of Beyond the Coverage, that Tadej Pogačar normally finds a way to win anyways, right? And it didn't look like he was breaking a sweat here on stage one. So, could they have won? I don't know. I won't say that for sure. But could they have made the race more exciting on stage one with the correct tactics of Bahrain victorious being used and employed correctly? For sure, this stage one would have come out differently, or the time gaps would have been much closer. Now, stage two comes down to a field sprint because it's Bike Exchange Dylan Groenewegen that was in a group of about 40 riders being led by his Bike Exchange teammates up front. He's got solid numbers around him, and they're in control all the way to about 1 kilometer to go until it's Bahrain victorious that gets on the front. They'll get swarmed over by the two Bardiani riders with about 250 meters to go. Dylan Groenewegen with about 150 meters to go will find his way out from just behind the Bardiani riders with a good, nice little push there. Love tap, I should call it more, from onto Pascal Ackermann, UAE Team Emirates, and then he'll accelerate to the line to take a fabulous win. And remember, he was suffering through Dauphiné, and now he came to another big hilly stage race here at Slovenia, but he wins stage two to make up for all that hard work, and now the rest of the week he's going to be in training mode because there's going to be a lot more climbing to go. Stage three was an exciting race because it was rainy and wet on stage three, and when they come into the big climb that's going to decide the stage here, that's when we're going to see there's a crash from Rui Oliveira, the UAE Team Emirates rider. When they come out of that, they're going to start the climb, and again, it's Bahrain victorious on the front, setting the tempo. Again, Bahrain victorious. You don't want to go into these tactics of making the race as hard as you can going uphill. You want to make it hard and attack any other place, but you don't want to attack Tadej Pogačar going up 7-8% climbs here at Tour of Slovenia. Tadej Pogačar makes them pay, gets on the front, drives it hard. He's got his teammate, of course, along with him, Rafał Majka, who I said already many times is spectacular. They go down to descent in cautious mode back there as it's wet and slippery on this stage 3. And then it's going to be Nicola Conchi from Albacete Phoenix, who must have did a daring descent back there and bridges up solo to the 2 riders in front between the valley finishes here of the descent and the final climb up to the finish. Now, Rafał Majka, just before this final climb starts, they'll have a little chat with his teammate. It's easy to see what this is going to be. Rafał Majka saying, I'm going to go 100% for you, Tadej Pogačar, even though I'm wearing the race leader's jersey. But this is your race, Tour of Slovenia. So Rafał Majka does a solid job with Conchi sitting on his wheel, and then Tadej Pogačar lights everyone up, gains time for the general classification, and puts himself in the race leader's jersey here at Tour of Slovenia after stage 3 finishes. Stage 4, a little more complicated with the tactics of UAE Team Emirates. And if I'm being picky here on this stage 4, when they start getting into the meat of the climbing and action here, it's going to be UAE Team Emirates that send their teammate up the road. Now, this is a bad tactic when I'm sitting on the couch, because UAE Team Emirates, the easiest tactic is easy to employ. Bahrain Victorious has already made it hard going up the climb. Put your teammates on the front, drill it, make it harder, and send Tadej Pogačar, race leader here with Rafał Majka on his wheel, up the road and start winning the stage. Instead, they played the tactic of trying to have someone else on UAE Team Emirates win the race here at Tour of Slovenia. But let me remind you guys, while I'm sitting on the podium here at the Beyond the Coverage, when you're winning races in Europe, they're all hard. When you're a UAE Team Emirates Tadej Pogačar, he can make things look easy from time to time, but there is no such thing as an easy race. So it's a mistake trying to send one of the other lesser riders from UAE Team Emirates up the road. Everybody's lesser, though, when you compare him to Tadej Pogačar. What am I thinking? So their rider goes up there. He can't follow that tax. And then what happens behind exactly what should have happened at the beginning of the climb here? Tadej Pogačar, Rafał Majka light it up. Come to the finish together hand in hand to win another fantastic stage here at Tour of Slovenia, giving Rafał Majka a stage 1 win and a stage 4 win here at Tour of Slovenia. Now, stage 5 will start, and it's a big group up the road of about 8-10 guys, if I remember correctly, and it's Bike Exchange doing the bulk of the work behind. This is the one time when I'm thinking Bahrain Victorious. Why not ride the front here? You guys are all the way down on GC. Dominic Novak has no chance here of winning the general classification. You guys haven't won a stage, but you're going to let this group go up the road. Instead, it's Bike Exchange riding on the front. They'll keep the time gap solid, but the problem is, with just about 12 kilometers to go, there's a steep climb. I'm talking super steep here, 8%, just thereabouts, but that's about 2 kilometers long. And of course, it's going to be Tadej Pogačar that lights things up. If I'm being picky here, Tadej Pogačar is a little bit inexperienced here as he's going up the climb, because when he goes over, he has Matej Mohoric on his wheel and his teammate back there, Rafał Majka, who's been dropped trying to close the gap. At this point in time, if you're Tadej Pogačar, just back off the pedals a little bit through all the corners and let your teammate on. Rafał Majka will come back on, and then behind, chasing through the valley after they come down the descent, chasing the 3 riders up front. It's going to be Luka Meskit, Bike Exchange. But up front, the organizer's car get in the way, and they start giving a draft to the 3 leaders in front and make it basically impossible for Luka Meskit's Bike Exchange, who have been pulling all day long to bridge this gap. In my professional opinion, sitting on the couch, Luka Meskit had a little bit of help from the cars to get this close, but then those cars absolutely in front basically just pulled this 3-rider group up front, with Tadej Pogačar leading it right away from Luka Meskit as he finally sits up and goes back to the group. Now up front, there's going to be a battle here, but it's going to be Rafał Majka doing the bulk of the leading out with under a K and a half to go. He'll lead all the way to the finish, and then Matej Mohoric will start his sprint. Again, right here, if I'm being picky to Tadej Pogačar, he backs off the wheel there of Matej Mohoric because he wants to get a run-up. But remember, this isn't a flat sprint. It's slightly uphill. Matej Mohoric will start his sprint a little bit early, and then Tadej Pogačar makes a little bit of a mistake. I'm nitpicking here, remember? He's going to the right of his teammate Rafał Majka, and Rafał Majka, as whenever you start getting a rider going to the left side, you might often see a rider up front that started the lead out drifting one way, and Rafał Majka starts to drift. Looks like he might close the gap on Tadej Pogačar, and instead stops his drift. Tadej Pogačar makes it between Rafał Majka and the fencing, comes back out on the wheel of Matej Mohoric. But if you had just sat on Matej Mohoric's wheel originally, you had already been there and been getting the draft the whole time. Now, with that sitting on the wheel there of Matej Mohoric is throwing in everything he can to the line, and Tadej Pogačar, the 2-time Tour de France champion, that's only 10 days away from the Tour starting, he lights up Matej Mohoric and wins the final stage here at Tour of Slovenia. taking the overall classification, no doubt with 2 stage wins. His teammate Rafael Majka, 2 stages plus second on the general classification. He'll take the KOM jersey along with Tadej Pogacar taking the points jersey, and then behind in the team classification, it's going to go to Caja Royale. Repa Wojtek from Kern Pharma, who will get the youth jersey and wrap out all the classifications here at Tour of Slovenia. Now, you ask yourself many times, I'll see in the comments, well, who did Rafael Majka and Tadej Pogacar beat? They beat a good quality field here. There's no doubt. There is nothing except good quality fields. It's not exceptional. It's not like when you're talking about July. It's not when you're talking about April for the classics and, of course, the Basque Country. That's why I always say when you look at the Basque Country, it's the best quality GC field in the world, bar July, and there's no other place during the season where you see a quality of field like the Basque Country, and certainly a quality field like at the Tour de France that's coming up in 10 days. The classics have their own quality, and it's April and July that's always the best. When you look here in June, you're talking about Dauphiné, and you're talking about Swiss, and you're talking about another race going on here, Slovenia. Plus, they got some semi-classics happening up in the north of France and Belgium that are going on, so the field is spread out. Keep that in mind, but also keep in mind when you're looking at Tadej Pogacar, it was a very good on-form Rafael Majka that was following his wheel and always at the limit, while Tadej Pogacar looked incredibly comfortable throughout this Tour of Slovenia. So you know the boy is on form when it comes to the Tour de France starting here in 10 days. Now, Bahrain victorious. They would ride at Dauphiné, pulling Jumbo-Visma around all day long. They would ride here, pulling Tadej Pogacar and UAE Team Emirates around at crucial moments here at Tour of Slovenia. But if we go to Tour of Swiss, after stage 1, when Williams was wearing the jersey, and you go to stage 2, they wouldn't ride on the front to defend Williams' jersey. So when you look at their tactics, it's all over the map and completely wrong throughout this month of June as we start the Tour de France. It'll be interesting to see if Bahrain victorious can put their tactics together correctly, and of course to watch the battle between Primož Roglič, Jumbo-Visma, and Tadej Pogacar, UAE Team Emirates when the Tour de France starts proper. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. I'll cover a bunch of stuff here in the final days leading up to the Tour de France, and of course the butterfly effect during the Tour de France. Like and subscribe. I'll see you real soon.